thank you for joining us today, Blair. It's really great to have you with us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you, Amy.
I'm looking forward to it. And so can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your time now? Because we're going to get into your journey later, but what I want to do is understand what you're doing now and who you're helping currently.
Sure. And I ask myself that question every day, so I really appreciate you asking it because then I have to actually think about what I'm doing. I would say that I am in the fourth reiteration of my life, not my career, but my life, and I am kind of doing what I want to do, which is I'm coaching right now. I have about 60 CEOs from around the world, and they teach me something every day. And we just got together for a week
Mm-hmm.
in lovely Tiburon, California, and I am working with friends. I have five little projects, and I have no one report. Well, I shouldn't say no one, but I have very few people reporting to me right now, which is extremely unique from
Mm-hmm.
the last 40 years, where I was always surrounded by people, taking care of me. So
Yeah.
I'm in a new phase.
Great. Brilliant. And so tell me about your journey then. How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I think that my experience um, may be a little bit, and it's great because you're all about humanity and human and interaction. I think it's that I finally have gotten to where I was supposed to be. My journey started with having two parents who, unfortunately, like a lot of people, my parents were divorced, so they both remarried. They lived in the next town across from each other, and they were both entrepreneurs. And so I would describe my childhood as somewhat controlled chaos, right? When you have two entrepreneurs, one in the service business and one they had a small airline, which is really an asset business.
Mm-hmm.
So from an early age, I learned what it's like to understand we have to do something or we can't pay the rent at the end of the month,
Yeah.
and that there's always something to do. So, I didn't know it at the time, but, we all are, a combination of both our personality and our environment. And my personality was the oldest boy, and I was a caretaker, and my environment was, we needed to figure out and solve problems, and most of those problems were with people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, how do you get people to show up on time, and how do you convince someone to rent a helicopter? They were just so that was where my journey began, and I think it's actually I'm back there, where the only difference is I don't worry about paying the rent every month, and I get to decide what problems I want to solve. They're not thrown on me. So for me, it's almost full circle.
Yeah. It's brilliant. And you made a distinction earlier in what you were saying about you're learning from people. And I think not everybody sees coaching that way. Sometimes people see coaching and development as you're almost teaching people or you're helping them develop. But it's interesting you had that dynamic of you're learning from people, because that's quite, I don't know if it's unique, but it's a unique way to articulate it.
Well, listen, thank you. I don't know if I even realized I said that, but I do believe it. That if you are coaching and you're not learning, you're going to get bored,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you can't give. I mean, love is selfish and unselfish, right? Relationship is dyadic. You have to have two people engaged in it. So it's a really interesting comment. You made me think to myself. I think that a lot of people think that they have a job and they're doing something, and that the outcome is the reason they're doing the job. In essence, it's the process. It's what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing every day that keeps you engaged. Now, the outcome is the bonus. It's the score on the board, and obviously, you have to score points, or you can't survive.
Yeah.
But you will not, I do not think, enjoy being a leader unless you're actually getting something back that nourishes you. And for me, it's curiosity and learning.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to me, to sit down with someone and hear their perspective and realize that that's really cool.
Yeah.
Or I never understood that.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the value. I know that's part of the value of coaching as well, because you as a coach, you'll be interacting with those. You said 60 people in your group at the moment, isn't there? 60 CEOs. You'll be interacting with them, and they'll each have their own unique challenges or their own unique perspective of those challenges. And then you get to take the learnings from that group and take it to the next group. And that's part of the value that you bring as a coach, I'm sure, because you've heard all of these challenges
Yeah,
and you've seen people
it's
overcome them.
absolutely because these patterns are transferable.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things in our group that we have is that people are from 40 different industries, and you would say, okay, that is got to be a burden. And in reality, it's the biggest strength of the group
Yeah.
because when someone's talking about, I just laugh because they're such different industries. We have a woman who's CEO of one of the largest portable potty companies in the country, and they put potties on trailers. And instead of the little blue boxes, you have a party at your house or there's a high end event, and you walk. You don't want people traipsing up and down your stairs. You have a trailer and it's got a fireplace and artwork, and you go in and it's
Yeah.
very, very different. And you say, well, what could she learn from someone? Another one of my CEOs has one of the largest stadium building companies where they send people out to build big stadiums,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you see the fact that they all have the same problems, what am I doing with my vendors? And I didn't realize that if I wanted to buy something, I could do a reverse auction, which
Yeah.
means that I could go to find the lowest bidder. That little connection not only gives them a solution they hadn't thought of, but it reminds them that they're not alone,
Yeah.
right? Because that is also one of the biggest challenges you have is, your company is always looking for solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're sitting there in a group and someone it helps you. And so I look at it as both rational and emotional at the same time, is
Yeah.
that, learning from other industries, maybe funnel vision versus tunnel vision, it nourishes you not only in the activity, but it nourishes you knowing that the world actually has patterns and that you're always can learn. It's
Yeah.
not always up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't forget which book it was because you seem behind them pretty much always reading. But there was a book and they were talking about this medical challenge. So they were creating a laser that was going to attack these cancer cells, and it was too strong if it came from one angle. And I can't remember where this person come from, but they got some kind of military background, and so they talked about attacking from all angles. So they cut the power of the laser in four, say, and then it didn't damage the cells, but it did attack the cancer cells. And that example went from the military into the medical. And I find stuff like that fascinating because not only do you then get an answer that comes from outside of your industry, but it also changes the way you think about other challenges. Who else is solving a similar challenge but in a completely different way. So it applies a lens.
Yeah,
I find
I
that's
absolutely, and I've seen that in my career. When people look at my career, they have one of two, reactions. One is, "Wow, that's really cool. You've been in 8 different industries," and
mm-hmm.
another is, you can't keep a job. Um, you're always, changing. And I think that for me, because I grew up back to this, where did you start? I think it's always important for a leader to reflect on their development, not just
Mm-hmm.
other people's development. And you're going to find, now I'm going to give a caveat. I'm married to a psychotherapist, so maybe I've been, pre-baked here, but you're going to find that the more you understand about yourself, the more you can understand how you can relate to other people and
Mm-hmm.
understand them. And so I had to come to grips with the fact that when I was in high school, I said, I will never, my dad was a recruiter, I will never go into recruiting and I will never be in the aviation business because I had seen how difficult
Yeah.
those businesses were. And when I went to college, I said, I am going to go and learn how real business is done. I'm going to get a business degree. And then I went to a big company in the US called General Electric, and it was the #1 training program. And they were going to teach me business. And then I
Mm-hmm.
went to get an MBA from Dartmouth because it was an Ivy League school and it was going to teach me business. And at the end of all of this, I realized that later on in my career, I went and ran an airline. And I, at one point, was managing 100 recruiters for our company when we were acquiring companies. So, and I enjoyed both of them. So the funny part about life is that my early years prepared me for what I love to do, which is basically change management,
Mm-hmm.
because I learned, how to deal with chaos. And I also learned how to deal with entrepreneurs. Sometimes people will say, when I'm introduced, they'll say, you're a serial entrepreneur. And most of the time I try to correct them. I am not. I am entrepreneurial, But it turns out, because of my background, I'm really good with entrepreneurs because I understand them.
Yeah.
And in some way, that was my family. I loved them. And so I loved figuring out how to add something different, so that they could be successful. And that's been my career. So I would challenge everybody, who is a leader. We don't take enough time to step back and figure out where we came from and
Mm-hmm.
why we are the way we are. And by the way, people, there's the buzzword is trauma, trauma, trauma. Um, Everyone has trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Life is not fair. And even when it is fair, it doesn't feel fair. And everyone has trauma. And so the only question is it going to be negative trauma or constructive trauma? Which
Okay.
means, what did we do with that trauma?
Yeah.
And I'm on a little soliloquy here, so I apologize. But I also sit on the board. I try to get like on the board of the top longevity institute in the world. I can say that without hurting people's feelings because we are the top one, and everyone would tell you that, the Buck Institute. But we do something very, very specific, and we're the first people to really look at human health span, and it turns out that humans need stress.
Mm-hmm.
We need stress. We can't actually function, and we can't grow. Even cognitive dissonance, growth mentally, is about stress. What's bad is either too little stress, believe it or not, or chronic stress.
Yeah.
So these things that we do every day, the traumas that we feel, are honestly what makes us human.
Yeah.
And that's how we grow, and that's how our people grow. So when I use the word coaching, I would say I've been coaching for a long time, because my job is, as my dad would say, to help people up, not to hold them up. Because if you have an employee that's not doing a good job and you hold them up, the second
Yeah.
you turn around, their legs aren't strong, they'll fall down. But
Mm-hmm.
can you help them through the trauma so that ultimately they come back and they help everybody else, including you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's always a way to actually look at what's happening and decide: too little stress, too much stress, Goldilocks,
Mm-hmm.
enough that it's not killing me, but I will need to take a rest after this.
Yeah. Is that distinct from the concept of anti-fragility?
I think it's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Anti-fragility, you would say, and again, there's different ways to look at it. I have to be able to deal with stress, and I have to be able to recover from it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting a little bit of different flavor on the same concept, which is, we can't fear it. Number
Yeah.
one, it's going to happen, and
Yeah.
number two, it is good for us if we can recover for it. When we talk about anti-fragility in some of our coaching sessions, I say, look, I don't know if any of you have gone with a trainer, and when a trainer's training you, sometimes they'll have you jump rope to get you to high intensity. Your heart rate will get over 85%. You'll be sweating and struggling, and then in 1 minute they'll actually stop you, and they'll take your heart rate, and they'll see how long it took you to recover to your normal heart rate. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very good proxy for your physical fitness. How long does it take you to recover? And that's what anti-fragility is.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long it takes you to recover from the things that happen to you, so you can then rest for a second, then you can go out and do it again. Now, if you're under chronic stress and you just can't recover, and you can't sleep, and you're worrying all the time, you're fragile, because you will break. The
Mm-hmm.
system will break. Now, are you going to break mentally, or are you going to break physically? Most people break physically before they break mentally, because we're highly motivated. And it's one of the sad pieces about being a strong person, is that we push ourselves too hard, and at the end of the day, we don't break mentally, but our body breaks down. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been great for me to be at the Buck Institute, because I can see the system dynamics of health, and how that actually relates to what we do as a sport and our mental activity. I mean, they're just one thing. They're not two things.
Mm-hmm. And so, what led you to get involved with the Buck Institute? Did you see that link between health, wealth, success, or was that an interest outside of?
Well, like every human, it either comes down to food or finding a mate, right? If you really break everything down, it really, but basically, I actually, I'm curious by nature, but I could have picked anything. And the woman I wanted to go out with is brilliant, and she loved longevity. And I thought, I'll impress her. I'll get on the board of this institute. Now, in a lot of ways, she changed my life path, because what I didn't realize is that it's easy for me to talk about this now and say it's very simple. But I was CEO of a public company. I was under pressure all the time. The stock
Mm-hmm.
market was going down. We were auto tech, and we were related to Tesla. Tesla was down 70%, and they couldn't yell at Elon Musk, but they could yell at me. And I was really stressed out, and I did not realize how close I was to breaking. So when I retired and I started to look at my system biology and my system dynamics, it became clear that this was a problem, and it's a problem with a lot of leaders, right?
Right.
Where there's two concepts. One is that we want to give, but we have to realize we have to be selfish and have self-care. That's
Uh-huh.
really difficult sometimes. And the second is that we can't be the best we are. If we were an athlete and we just worked out 12 hours a day, we would come back and say, look, I'm breaking my body down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to perform as well. But as business people, we always say, I can take another meeting. I got to be tough. I got to show my people that I'm doing this. And it just, it can work for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But very few people can endure that kind of chronic stress without breaking their body down.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple things that are very, very different about humans, right? And one of them is that we have a parasympathetic nervous system, which means that our brain and our body communicate with each other all the time.
Uh-huh.
And so you say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. What does that actually do? Well, it means the way you think and the stress you have actually affects physically every organ in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is that it's asymmetrical. 80% of the information that your body gets comes from your brain, and 20% is feedback loops from your body. So the vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve in your body, goes from your brain through your stomach biome, through your heart, through all the different organs. And so let me give you a simple example, which everyone would understand. The first one, oh, I hurt my back. My back hurt, and it hurts every day. And it just, I'm starting to get depressed. Why? Because the pain in my
Mm-hmm.
body is actually, it's just, I'm enduring, and I never get a rest, right? People can understand that. They can
Mm-hmm.
see the physical in it. What people don't realize is that the way you think, 60% of illness is impacted by how you feel, right? How you feel. Are you positive? Do you feel loved? Do you feel safe? The statistics are staggering, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if you actually believe your doctor cares about you, there's a 60% better chance that the drug he gives you actually is going to work better. If you believe that people are actually praying for you when you have a surgery, you have a 25 to 30% better recovery rate. Now, again, people say, oh, you're from California. Hundreds of studies. This is not, that I'm from California. This is the fact that your attitude, and most importantly, your attitude about are you connected and loved, matters. Now,
Uh-huh.
why is that biologically significant? Because your immune system is getting messages from your brain on whether it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel safe and you don't feel loved, your immune system actually is not functioning at the level it should. So it doesn't help you protect yourself from things. It doesn't help you recover from surgery
Uh-huh.
because it's under stress, which is why we talk about, how do you balance your parasympathetic system with block breathing? Because there's two ways that your parasympathetic system can actually reset itself.
Mm-hmm.
And one is through talk,
Okay.
understanding something, and the other is through breathing, because those are the two ways that your brain gets connected to your body. So it isn't about meditation, it's about safety, right? So if you break it down that way, you got to feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm. Is that those studies that you talk about? Is that some of the work of Joe Dispenza?
It's literally been across the board. I mean, there's there's been from people who are studying religion. There's a part of your brain called God complex that lights up when you feel cared about. That we don't actually call it the God complex because they've always called it the God complex. All the way to very specific biofeedback on cell regeneration, and
Yeah.
you can see. So it's not one person. This is, you can Google it and you will find that whether you want to look at studies that had to do with religion or you want to look at studies that have to do with cell biology, they all say the same thing. Again, what's different about humans? Parasympathetic system is one big thing. If you have read the book Homo Sapien or the book Tribal, where we're talking about the development of humans, you'll also find a second thing that makes humans different. The first one is that we need to be connected. The
Mm-hmm.
second one is that we're the only animals that we can tell that have imagination and the ability to create fiction. Now, you say, that's weird. What do you mean create fiction? Because if you can imagine a connection or you can create fiction that I am connected, we love
Mm-hmm.
each other, we see each other at spin every morning, we are actually connected. That is a superpower compared to most animals on Earth because they actually make connection through things that are really happening. They
Mm-hmm.
physically live in the same thing. I know what that animal is. I'm an alpha and they're a beta. It's a physical thing. So both good and bad, that ability to connect actually helps our parasympathetic system, but it also lets us organize in much bigger groups. We're Americans, right? We're part of NATO, right?
Yeah.
So animals can't do that. And so in some ways, it's a positive because it was protective that we can restructure groups. Someone can
Mm-hmm.
come, Genghis Khan, they did a study on why he was successful. And the number one thing wasn't that he was, a better athlete or smarter or that he was a better killer. Genghis Khan learned really early because he was a bastard son and he was thrown out of the tribe because his father died and they threw out his mother and his father. He learned human dynamics and he learned connection. So one of the big things that Genghis Khan did was whenever he took over a tribe, he didn't kill them all. He actually assimilated them in. And
Mm-hmm.
he also changed the hierarchy. It used to be, in ancient times, it was all about merit, who's the strongest. He would actually find people who would protect him, who cared about him. So he developed a secondary system of governance, which wasn't just based on, the number two guy is the second strongest guy.
Yeah.
The number two guy was a guy who would help me keep the tribe in place. And that was a huge dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard, I feel a little bad about talking about Genghis Khan because he was actually a killer. But he led the largest empire in the world.
Yeah.
And the reason he did is because he understood both the need for connection,
Mm-hmm.
but also the ability to connect using this whole idea of an imagination. And so, when you look at that, if those are two superpowers that humans have, they can be used for good or evil.
Yeah.
And leadership is all about using them for good.
Uh-huh.
You have an amazing opportunity. The two things that are on the opposite side that destroy people, one is fear and the other is social comparison. Now, why are fear and social comparison built into our systems? Because in the old days, the ancient times, you should be fearful because if something's going to kill you, you need to know it sooner than later. And so you're always watching who's outside of my tribe, who
Mm-hmm.
don't I understand? In fact, even Dunbar's number, when you look at that number of how many people we can connect to at any given time, which has been studied over and over again, they keep coming up with the same number. Now, I'm going to argue with you that I think you can expand that number geometrically, but the base number is 150.
Mm-hmm.
150 people that you consider family. So you're genetically connected to them, that you consider friends, acquaintances, contacts, or people you recognize.
Yeah.
That tribe means that those people that you recognize, even if you don't know them, you're walking down the street, you're not afraid of them because you've seen them before, or they look like you, and therefore you're not afraid of them. What is that doing? It's bringing down fear so you can actually function not in fear, which is why we're a tribal animal, right? The second piece on social comparison, they say, well, how is that the same as fear? Because we all are built in with social comparison to say, where are we in the pack? Because if we're at the bottom, maybe we're going to get thrown out. Maybe we're going to get killed. That's why when you take a look at social media and why how destructive it is
Mm-hmm.
because social media is using the negativity of social comparison. Oh my God. Oh my God. They look happy. I'm not happy. I'm depressed. Oh my God. They're doing better than me. Oh, they have more money than me. So in essence, the fear and social comparisons were built into our psychology because of our parasympathetic nervous system and because of our ability to connect.
Mm-hmm.
They can be used as good things. They also can be used as bad things. And so as leaders, if we don't start with humanity, it doesn't matter. All that other stuff is just a sport.
Yeah.
I took a job at at a high tech company. I made a terrible mistake. Now I can say this now because I don't need a job, and I think that people think I'm old, so it's funny. But my first job in high tech was that a friend that was at GE, was head of strategy, said, I loved working with you when you were a trainee, and I think you have a lot of potential. And I know your dad told you to work with people who are going to teach you. I want you to come work with me. And I was on a payphone back in the old days. A plane was going to take off, and I said, I'm going to work with you. That's the right thing to do. I hung it up. He said, well, just before you hang up, it's with Sun. I thought he meant Sun Oil. It turned out to be Sun Microsystem. That was one of the biggest high tech companies in the world. At the time, we had workstations, and it's now part of Oracle. But when I showed up, I didn't even know what they did. And I sat down because I was very depressed. And the guy in the office next to me, I was head of strategy, the head of R&D, said to me, listen to me, do not quit. I said, I don't even know what we do. I said, these people are talking a language that I don't understand. He said, look, we do not have problems with technology. We're the leader in the world. We have problems with people. How do I get people to actually build technology? Because that guy's pissed at that guy, and this guy thinks his idea is better. And that guy was Eric Schmidt, who went on to be chairman of Google, right? And he knew, and he was head of R&D. He's a technical person, but he understood that it really is about, you start with people and then you expand to what you need people to do to be successful and how to help other people.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, and when I say I've come full circle, that's where I've come. Was when I was young, I worried about people, and as I'm older, I realized that's the key. Now, the biggest thing I've learned is to also take care of myself, which when you're young, you don't need to do as much. You got a lot more strength. But today, I worry. After this, I'm going to Pilates.
Good.
So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if, because I'm a minority in there, I'm not sure that they are all happy, but they're getting used to me. So maybe I'll become part of the tribe. They have to imagine that.
Yeah. Do you think that moment with Eric Schmidt, was that the moment that you started building the career that you're in now, when you had that epiphany about people?
I think, again, back to the help versus hold.
Mm-hmm.
If he had said, here's what you need to do, and I want to tell you, it was different. He knew I needed a little bit of confidence that it was going to be okay. I needed a little bit of hope. So I think that was one example of someone stepping in at a moment in time and saying, you got to reframe this.
Yeah.
You are actually framing it as you don't have skills. Mm-hmm. You need to reframe it in what makes you different. And if you're different, then you can help a tribe.
Yeah.
And I went on to found a division after that. And, I was in tech for a long time. And I laugh sometimes because, people would come up to me and say, oh, you're a tech guy. I'd say, oh, yes, I am. I wasn't a tech guy until I was in the company. But the second I was in the company, once I was in the tribe, no one ever asked me what my background was. Never. Right? I was a tech guy. And so again, you can imagine and transform yourself as long as the tribe can accept you, and you can accept the tribe and say, look, we're here to change the world. And, we did some great things. I'm forever happy of that, little mistake that I made, but I'm not sure it was a mistake because I picked the person and he was my mentor, and he as well with Eric Schmidt, Eric Herr, who went on to do some amazing things. A lot of people will talk about his business things, but we went to India and built nursing hospitals, because in the Orissa province of India, he was great strategic mind. He said, look, they can't get healthcare out there, and I can't actually get doctors to go. It's the poorest region. Let's look at this differently. Let's figure out how we can actually not only get medical care, but help women. And what he realized was, if I call it nursing, I'll build a nursing nursing training center. And because they would have to walk, 2 days to get there, I'll build dorms. And what happened is these women were sent from the village because they didn't have doctors, and they went to nursing school. When they came back, doctor by another name. They were the doctors of the village, and he changed a culture by looking at it differently. I was talking to him the other day, and this is where we can all imagine things that will change. He during Katrina, which was a huge hurricane in the U.S., where a lot of people died, and it was horrendous. We were working with the American Red Cross, and he was the head strategist, civilian strategist. When they went in, they said, the FEMA, which is our version of disaster relief, came in and said, we're going to build these cities. We're going to build 3 of these big cities because these people don't have a place to live. And he said, doesn't make sense to me. People don't want to be in big camps. They don't want to be further away than they have to from where they grew up. They don't want to break that connection. They've already lost so much. There's got to be another way. Let's reframe this. And he said, what's happened to all these hotels? The ones that are not flooded. No one's coming to visit. Why don't we go to those hotels instead of building these big tent camps, and we'll rent the rooms from them at a discount. The hotels will be happy because they'll stay in business, and we'll get people to be in the community they were in. And that actually changed everything. And now they do that all the time. But again, this is the beauty of being human, is we have this capability to play a sport. Now, whether it's in business or it's in disaster relief or it's in whatever you want to do. This is what makes us special, and we should embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna, if I can, Blair, I'm just gonna put you on the spot, because prior to recording, you said something really, really interesting about leadership. You said you didn't necessarily like the phrase leadership, and you talked about it being a sport. Can you just reshare what you talked about there?
Sure. Call me out. Look, again, we use business terms, right? And leadership is a business term. But every term that gets used too much becomes too wide. And I just believe leadership is an aspiration. We want to be good leaders. But, I look at life at the end of the day as, who we are and who's our tribe and our family, and taking care of ourselves. And then we get an opportunity, and the opportunity is to play a sport, and that's called business. Now, I say we have this opportunity, but I want to be, reticent and say that, look, 50% of the world has no opportunity. They're subsistence. They don't make any decisions. They don't play any sport. They are actually workers that have to do whatever they have to do to survive. 80%, 90% of this world doesn't have a lot of latitude in what they can do. They've been put in a certain place and a certain caste and they have to play that in there. For a lot of us, especially entrepreneurs who have this special skill to take a risk and do something unique, we have the ability to do crazy and fun things. They're hard, but we have the ability to do it. So once you've decided that you want to play a sport, wouldn't you go and have fun with it? Right? Even in the tough times, you lose a game. I used to take when my kids' teams lost a game and it was a tough game, that was a learning moment, right? And we would spend more time after the game talking about how you feel and what you learned. And I knew I was making progress when the highly competitive kids would cry, because they needed to cry, because for them, it wasn't they're taking this too seriously. That's the way they felt. And for the other kids who were caretakers, to actually be able to comfort them, that was what they were meant to do. So when you're building a team, don't be afraid of conflict or loss. My dad would say, look, sometimes you're earning, sometimes you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
You can win both ways, but be very careful not to burn, because the second you break your leg or you break mentally, you don't play anymore. So it's fine. Over a career, you may look at it and say, I did such good work. Why didn't that guy, social comparison, sneaking back in, that guy down there, he's not as smart as me. He made more money than me. Great. That's not the point. The point is, if you really enjoyed the team you're working with and you learned a lot, it's made you different. Mm-hmm. And you will earn, and there'll be another time where you don't deserve as much. Now, we don't like to admit that. I got lucky. Yeah, but if you have a good career, sometimes you're earning, sometimes you're learning. Now, if you can do both at the same time, that's nirvana. Yeah. But again, the second you burn, the game's over.
Yeah.
right? So be very careful because elastic bands can get stretched until they lose their elasticity.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have a different challenge,
Yeah.
right? And no one's going to be there at the end of the day to say, I take responsibility because you burnt yourself out.
Yeah.
They're just not going
True.
to do it. We all have a responsibility to ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, in terms of the leaders that you work with now, what are there commonalities in the challenges that they're facing at the moment? Do you see that there are threads?
Yeah. I mean, look, I've been in 8 different industries and you have to have content knowledge and there's different things happening at different times,
Mm-hmm.
but we all deal with the same things. Like for instance, everyone who has a product or service has to sell,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, selling is an interesting concept. We like to say, oh my God, it's this and that and stuff like that. And in fact, we've bifurcated into marketing and sales and all these things. But when you really think about sales, it's asking someone for something, right? It's asking someone for money, right? And so all sales is really just math and behavioral science.
Okay.
Does this work out that the math work out that I can survive on this and they can pay for it? It needs to work out. If the product isn't going to add value or there's math, right? And the other is just behavioral science. Why? Why do they want it? How do I communicate that? If I have something that I truly believe is valuable to a customer, then I have the ethical responsibility to figure out how to let them know that. Now, they may say no, but it's not that I'm a salesman trying to sell you something. I have an ethical responsibility. I have something I think and I believe in and I'm excited about that can do you, it can help you.
Yeah.
And if they don't take it, yes, you feel bad about that, but you move on to the next thing. So everybody has to sell, right? Everybody has to deal with people. And
Mm-hmm.
I always say it's the greatest thing that really leaves a mark, which is when you have people reporting to you, you have to understand them, which means you have to understand their life. And when they have a bad day, you're going to be impacted by that.
Yeah.
It's awesome until it's not awesome. And you're like, oh, because what happens is you spend more time in other people's emotional space than you do in yours,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're a leader. You need to be focused outward and you need to get those points on the board. So I don't see a lot of difference in businesses. Some are more technical, some are less technical. They all have people you have to manage. We all have sales. We can learn from almost anybody. And in fact, it's better to learn from someone who has a business different than yours. So you can ask yourself, what
Yeah.
is the downside of the business I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think there's more in common than not, but I think that we become experts and therefore, I'll give you another crossover of biology and business. We are designed to be lazy. We've been in starvation for thousands of years. We actually are designed to conserve energy, right? So when you go to the gym, now I've owned a bunch of gyms and I've also owned a bunch of diet companies. And so I've looked at behavioral science, right? When you go to the gym and they go, oh, no, 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 you need to do muscle confusion. The reason you need to do muscle confusion is because your body, the more you do the same thing, it gets more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's really bad. My muscles won't get bigger. I won't burn as many calories. Ooh, that's really bad. No, it's not. Your body is saying, oh, you're doing this. Maybe I can be more efficient so I don't burn as many calories so you can do more of this. Your body assumes whatever you're doing, you want to be more efficient. So the same thing happens in your brain. When we talk about neuron spikes, puns, ironically, are one of the telltale signs of the of intelligence capability. Why? Because you need 9 neuron spikes to go, I'm going to say this word, I'm going to say this word. I know how they connect to each other. I know that in this context, this happens. I know that this is funny, that's not funny. When you do a pun, you really have to actually process things very quickly. It's a joke, but it's a joke with contextual meaning to it. People's brains get notched because we try to figure out how to do something. Once we know how to do it, we get better and better and better at it. Why? Because once we know what to do, we want to be better at it. But that takes away creativity and it takes away the ability to adapt because you have to retrain your brain to not do the same thing. Confirmation bias. We do it because we've done it before and it worked. So a lot of people, I see people who start a new business and they're trying to do the same thing they did in the last business.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, they're trying to do the same thing. This is a different business. You got to open yourself up. Maybe some of the patterns are different. So we have to be really careful. Doing things that we feel comfortable in give us rest.
Mm-hmm.
But if all we do, again, back to lack of stress, is we do the same thing over and over again, yeah, we're more comfortable, but we may not actually cause enough stress to grow and to
Mm-hmm.
achieve something. So again, every time I talk about business, I think of human biology,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Makes sense. It makes sense. And so, who influences you, Blair? What is it? Is it peers? Or is it the people in your groups? Are there leaders, past or present, famous or otherwise, that you particularly take an insight from? Who are
Yeah.
your influences?
Again, I think everyone is different, depending. I'm different than I was when I was younger, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the things that influence me is it's really difficult for me to get influenced by an abstract. Like we were talking earlier about Richard Branson, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've known Richard for a long time, and so I think of him as a human, not as
Yeah.
Richard Branson.
Yeah.
Every time I interact with him, I actually learn something. Either learn something about him or learn something about myself. So I need interaction. It's very hard for me in the abstract sense to. When I was at GE, I was fortunate enough to spend a bunch of time with Jack Welch,
Mm-hmm.
and again, good and bad. Not everyone's perfect,
Yeah.
but I learned a lot from him about the way he thought about business and the way he thought about people. He was in a very difficult situation, had to do a turnaround at that point in time. GE's power system business, we used to be the number one in the world, and now it wasn't. And he did some, he had to go do some tough things. He had to go restructure, and he got rid of some people, and he had, a very different philosophy. He was the right leader for that time. Now, again, would he be the right leader for different times? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm influenced by people I interact with every day. When I go to get coffee, I am watching, what's going on. And sometimes someone will do something. I'll think, God, that was
Yeah.
really nice. I have to remember that, small acts of kindness are actually more impactful than almost anything you can do,
Mm-hmm.
because they actually, and again, human biology, serendipity theory and inconsistent reinforcement are very powerful drivers of human behavior. What do I mean by that? Well, when we were in Iraq, they trained us on inconsistent reinforcement in torture. If you get, captured, they're going to do things to you and you're not going to expect it, because that's the way you torture people, right? It's inconsistent. When I was at TPG, later on, we bought 32 casinos. We own some of the biggest casinos in the world, Caesars and Harrah's and Bally's. Guess what? Why do people gamble? Inconsistent reinforcement on the positive side, because you don't know you're going to win. When you do win, you get 10 times the dopamine and 10 times the serotonin, right? So, when you look at that, there's negative. You can torture a person by having them worry about what's going to happen next, or you can reward a person. Why do people like in the America, they like college sports? Because it was much more unpredictable. So when your team wins, you get
Yeah.
much more of a bang for the buck. Now let's talk about that in everyday life. If that is what human serendipity theory, oh my God, your sister went to school with my cousin. I like you because I just got a chill surge of, wow, that's really cool, right? It's more than if you had just said, yeah, I went to college here, you went to college there. There was a serendipitous like connection. And so when you take a look at kindness, we've already established that we're tribal. We've already established that we're trying to figure out how to get over fear, which means, when do I let you in the 9 levels of intimacy? Are you a danger or not a danger? So when you do kindness, not only do you actually surprise someone by just doing something kind, but their reaction actually gives you back more. We believe it's 1 to 2 times more you get back when you do something nice. And kindness, again, from a tribal standpoint, can be something as simple as smiling.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you notice when you're walking down the street, the way we protect ourselves is if you look up and there's 9 places you store a face. You don't store faces. Why? Because you try to be more efficient, right? You would never store a whole face because it's like storing a big picture. You would go, oh, I recognize people by the 9 different things, and I try to guess as fast as I can. So if I see you a lot, I can recognize you literally right away because I go, oh, I recognize the eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're walking down the street and you look at someone. After 4 to 5 seconds, if you don't recognize them, you look down. Why? Because animals look at how do you look a dog in the eye when you don't know them? No, because they look at that as a threat, right? So if you don't recognize someone, they're probably someone that's not part of your tribe, and you look down so that they know you're not out there to get them, right? And so kindness is a way of bridging that gap to say, I may not be part of your tribe, or I may be part of your tribe, but I'm going to give you something that's going to signal to you that you're safe, that you're
Yeah.
safe, because I smiled at you, because I like you, right? And I walked by you and I waved, or I mentioned your name. These are really simple things. Why, when you're walking, when they call walking around in a business, why does it matter? Because you don't have to do everything for every person every day, but
Mm-hmm.
those random acts of kindness signal to them that they shouldn't be worried,
Yeah.
and that they should have hope, and that they should go, do things. So again, I hope, if one thing, I know we've had a random walk here, that if I've imparted anything, it's that we have to think from the human back out,
Yeah.
not from the business back in. How can I,
Mm-hmm.
what's my business, and how do I get humans to do it?
Yeah.
We think about the humans, and then we think about the business, and then we figure out the gap,
Yeah.
what's working, what's not working. And by the way, you may have some humans you love, you need to get rid of. They're just not, the gap's not going to get overcome. I had to fire my best friend. And he was not happy
Mm-hmm.
about it, because he had to go out and find a job. But later on, he came back and said, if you'd left me in that job, I would have slowly died, because I was
Yeah.
losing my confidence, because I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I didn't want to lose it, because obviously I needed the money. But
Mm-hmm.
by getting me out of that environment, you as a leader gave me a chance to find a job I really did like. And now I'm going to buy you dinner. Right.
Yeah.
So, it's looking from the human out to the business, but looking at the gap and then deciding what you want to do with it. Those
Mm-hmm.
are the decisions we make. We don't make decisions on what people do and what people don't do. That's hubris, that
Mm-hmm.
we control them. But we can see a pattern, and we can see whether it is likely or not, and what changes we can make. And sometimes the changes, they're too much.
Yeah.
One of the, I'm on a roll here, but when 360 reviews came out, where you had to, this was very different in the United States. It used to be your boss evaluated you. You sucked up to your boss. You did some good things. You got a promotion. Then they come out with this California thing. I'm going to ask everyone on your team what they think of you. That really sucks,
Okay.
because I'm not, they may not like me every day. Right. And so one of the things that I did, I said, oh, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to, this guy on my team is having a hard time. I'm going to spend more time with him, because everyone on the team is going to look at me and go, you're a good person. You helped him, and you made us more successful, because when you brought him up, we all went up in performance. And so the 360 review came out, and you can guess the outcome. The outcome is I got lousy ratings, because they said, why are you spending time with the worst person, and you're not spending time with us? We're working really hard and we're doing well. I need you, but you're spending all your time with this person who's not succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a lesson about human psychology, a lesson about tribalism, a lesson about fairness, a lesson
Yeah.
about kindness. I could be kind to him, which would have been firing him, but then putting time in to help him find another job,
Yeah.
right? But kindness wasn't holding him up.
Mm-hmm. That's a good analogy, and a good loop back to the start as well. And so, in terms of what's happening next for you, what sort of themes are coming around the corner? What kind of things are people concerned about? What are you bracing yourself to support your coachees with?
Yeah, look, for me, I said early on, I said I'm on a fourth phase. I hope I have more phases. I hope I keep getting better and better at it. But I also think I'm in the last third of my life. Okay, like I'd like to live longer, but I can tell you all the statistics, and death is undefeated.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I started a meeting the other day when the C's came in. I said, let's talk about what's different about us. You're from a small town in Idaho. You're from downtown London. You're in this industry. You're in that industry. What do we have in common? So they were expecting me to say we have in common that we're here to help each other, and it's true, and that we're all in business, and it's a great sport, and that's true. But I've already said those things, right?
Okay.
So I said, I bridged over and I said, look, The fact is, you all invested time to come here, right? You invested time. And let me just tell you that the money is nothing compared to the time that you gave me. And I want to thank you for that. But I also want to point out to you that the one thing we have in common is we're all going to die, and we don't know how much time we each have,
Yeah.
right? And so whatever we do, this investment, you better get something out of it. It better be in connection so that you connect with people and become a better person. It better be in cognitive dissonance, that you learn something new, or it better be in your consciousness, right? That you understand things about yourself that you didn't understand when you came in here. If you're not getting one of those three things in the next 2 days, then you have a problem. Not me. You have a problem. You better be focused, right? So when you ask me what's next for me, I'm in the last third of my life. So I'm going to focus on having health so that I can get as much time as I have, spending time with my family. It's the top 10 people that you spend time with are who you are. They're who you are because they influence you. Okay. Whether you believe it or not. And when you look at those, I've done an audit because I'm writing this book on relationship and Dunbar's number. When you actually do an audit, I would challenge people on the podcast, do an audit, go back on your, calendar last month, but then start this month. And after you've done a really rough draft, look at who you spend time with. You will find that 50% of the people that you spend time with are not people you wanted to spend time with. Okay. And they're not good for you, because it turns out that sometimes you have to spend time with people, but sometimes you don't. And other times, the people who want the most from you are not that you want the most from them. So they're highly motivated to get you to do things. Now, is that your, needy brother-in-law who's just sucks out your energy, but you feel like your sister's husband, you got to spend time with it? Or is it someone who calls you up and needs favors? Or is it someone in business who wants to do a deal with you and they're wasting your time by, having dinner with you and you're thinking, yeah, I got to do this, but I don't really want to. If you're not spending 80% of the time with people you want, of course you have to spend 20% doing the things in life that, are inefficient. But if you're not spending 80% of the time with the people you want, guess what you're going to talk about when you die? Yeah. Okay. I know one of my friends is a palliative care doctor, and I did a tour with him, and he would talk, he watched 1,000 people die. And that is brave, because we all want to look the other way because it's awful. But he sat there with these people over the last months of their lives. And at the very end, he wrote a book like several people have done, and it said, what do people talk about? What struck me out of the 10 things that people talk about is that 4 were always consistent, always consistent. So if I leave you with anything, the end game for your business, which is you, your business is you, is that you want to actually, on your deathbed, actually be able to answer these questions correctly. So one of the questions was, who do I love and who loves me? Of course, right? A lot of people have regrets, right? That they don't have that, the relationships they want. Another question is, big one, of the big 4 is, did I make a difference? Did my life make a difference? Did I change anything? Right? Did I have a purpose to be here, or was it just random? Right? A third one, is, did I have to die? Did I do something wrong? Did I make the wrong decisions? I could have elongated my life if I had taken care of myself, or I'd done this. You start to get into that, oh my God, what could have I done different? Right? The fourth one to me is the most haunting, right? Because it's the one that's completely under our control, and it impacts the first 3. And the fourth one is, again, he had 10, but this was the one that impacted me was I my authentic self? And did I do the things that I knew I wanted to do? Okay. Because that actually impacts all the others, right? How fearful was I? Did I, was I vulnerable? Did I take chances? Did I do this because it was the right thing to do, but I really didn't want to do that job? Did I start a company? Did I love the love of my life? Did I spend more, time? Was I my authentic self? And it takes a while to figure out who you are, right? But the second you start figuring out who you are, you should be judging how you use that last part of your life, whether it's 50%, 70%, 30%. And you should be asking yourself, am I being my authentic self, or am I being influenced by what the world wants me to be, or what other people want me to be? Because you will have this question at the end, unless you get hit by a bus, which may be better. You don't have to think about it, but you're going to ask yourself this question. And
Yeah.
this one's in your control. So it's hard to, it's hard to feel sorry for someone who, at the end of the day, we played a sport, we had an ability to make these decisions. That doesn't mean we didn't have bad things happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
But again, back to that's our job is to recover.
Yeah.
Because again, the more time you spend in bad things, the less time you spend in good things.
Mm-hmm.
So don't push it down, because if you push it down and you don't live through the pain, it comes back to get you anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but how quickly do you get over the loss? Most great athletes will tell you that the biggest skill they learned was not to feel guilty. I played a play, I screwed up,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually I strip out the emotion, because the way you store things is with an emotional tag and a logical tag. I strip out the emotion. I said, when I'm running that play, if I look left and I look right, they know what I'm doing. Not going to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I don't want to use I'll use an example that's more extreme, but it's the exact same thing. In theater, when you're, the people who do the best in theater, and because you're in a terrible situation where none of us want to kill people and none of us want to be killed, the biggest way that you recover and don't get PTSD is you feel it when you're there. If anyone tells you they don't feel anything, they're lucky, because they're a psychopath and they're in a terrible situation. So maybe being a psychopath is better while you're in it. But when you walk back out of it, you have to strip out the emotion and remember, because you don't want to ever forget. But if you carry the emotion with you, and the guilt and the negative, it will come back to eat you.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's hey, for me, I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about my philosophy, because I like to talk. But I hope that in my world that I gave someone something that gives them a little bit more knowledge or a little bit more hope, and they go out and have fun with it, and they make other people's lives better. That's the last third of my life.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And so, in terms of, did you mention you've got a book? You're working on a book at the moment.
I've been working on a book for 3 years, and I'm still working on it. That's the bane of, but it's a subject that I'm fascinated with, because it really is. It's about Dunbar's number, and again, anyone who doesn't, go look up Dunbar's number. It's fascinating. A lot of companies have used that, the 150 number, about how they develop teams and divisions. But it's been proven over and over again, whether it's, in the modern age with technology or when you go backwards. But I believe that there's a way that you can be more efficient in that 150 people, which is, there are certain people that you can reactivate quickly. So back to this anti-fragility is how quickly you recover. The upside of relationship is how quickly you recover. So when I see someone that I haven't seen in a long time, I don't get nervous, and I don't try to walk my way back in. I actually go right from where I was before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I take the chance, because it's risky. I haven't seen them in a long time. Maybe they're not going to like me. Maybe they moved on. I go right back in. And if they pull back and say, we were friends then, but then I get a message, but I get the message very quickly, but I don't waste time.
Yeah.
Right. And therefore I can reactivate nodes. So we may have 150 nodes of a friend and acquaintance, and they move through these circles to the point where they used to be my friend, and now they're acquaintance. And now they're just someone I know, and it's been a long time. But if I don't take the chance to reactivate that, I can't move them up. If I can't move them up into my inner circle, I won't get as much out of it, because it's fine to, the way that he defines, a contact is that you recognize them.
Okay.
And you look at people's phones, and I have 15,000 contacts. Okay. Maybe I recognize the name. Maybe I don't recognize the name, but that's really not a relationship. That just means that I probably shouldn't be too afraid of them if I put them in my contact and they called up and I saw their name. It's still tribal, but it's, you just have to look at it and say, but am I going to reactivate them? I just had someone at my coaching thing. After 20 years, he called me up. He's working on this electrode that can do an EKG on your brain, very quickly, instead of putting the whole hat on and stuff like that. And I said, come to this coaching thing. I don't get to spend any time with you. I haven't seen you in years. He came to it, and it was like we reignited our friendship. And he added value because he could talk about something that he was passionate about. So that relationship, after 20 years of zero, I got, I took a chance.
Yeah.
He could have been a jerk, and I would have, that would have been a mistake. But I thought I knew who he was, and you know,
Yeah. I think it depends on the fundamentals as well, doesn't it, in terms of how that relationship started and where you left that relationship. I think if you treat people well and you respect people, even 20, 30 years down the line, they're going to remember that. And so it's easy then to reignite it.
right. And people always think about the relationship in totality, but two
Yeah.
great markers mentally for people are how you entered the relationship, how did you meet them, and
Mm-hmm.
how you left the relationship.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's you moved on from college, but it's the same thing for a company. I always tell people, look,
Yeah.
this you may be leaving, but how you leave, if you're rushing out, you're degrading how people will remember you,
Yeah.
because people can't remember everything that you did with them. They remember your first date, and they
Mm-hmm.
remember the last time they talked to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take a second, if it matters to you, to actually say something that, excuse me, that matters, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you, Blair. And final question then, before I let you get on with your day, and because I know you've got a busy couple of weeks coming up. Are there books that you would recommend? It doesn't have to be books, actually. It could be a documentary, it could be another podcast. Is there something that you've consumed that's helped shape your perspective that you could share with the audience?
So, given that we talked about humans, which is what your favorite subject, and given that we talked about, biology, look, the book Homo Sapien is a
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal book because it
Okay.
makes you think about who we really are. The book Tribal by Gunter is a great book because it talks about how we connect to each other. And one of my favorite books right now is a book called Scientific Wellness, which is I think that Nathan Price and Lee Hood are probably going to win the Nobel Prize in longevity for their whole talk on scientific wellness. And it's a great guide to what I was talking about before, which is, let's simplify this down. Science can help you predict and prevent illness, but the only thing that really cures you from illness is your ability to personalize and to participate in your own health. Doctors can never know enough about you, and every human is different. For
Mm-hmm.
some people, intermittent fasting is phenomenal. I mentioned earlier that I had diet companies. Diet companies are great, right? Not only do, when they fail, they blame it on themselves. Everyone blames it on themselves. And then they come back in 18 months because diets are inherently a joke, right? You can say, I need to do calorie restriction, been proven through decades, right? I can say that I need unprocessed food, very clear. I can say I need diversity of food and more vegetables, very clear. Everything beyond that is personalized. If you haven't put a CGM on, a constant glucose monitor, where you put it on for 15 days and you watch what you eat and you see what foods spike insulin, which is insulin is the basis of inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
insulin, glucose and inflammation, then you don't know what foods are good for you, you
Okay.
know? And if you haven't done a biome with your stomach, you don't know what your stomach actually absorbs and what it actually rejects that causes inflammation. You can't do a diet until you actually get enough data to personalize and bring to your dietitian or bring to your doctor. So this whole idea around personalization is very, very strong because we do these diets and we don't know whether they're good for us. Exercise is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Certain exercises are much better for people than other people. But the one thing that's common is moving 15 minutes every hour. If you move 15 minutes every hour, it's more impactful than 2 hours of exercise,
Oh, okay.
right? So we have gyms and we like to do exercise. Look, if you enjoy running and you enjoy gyms, muscle mass is big and maybe you have to go to the gym. But if you don't move 15 minutes every hour, then the exercise is a bad trade, right? So again, I'm pushing this scientific wellness by Nathan. It just talks about these simple concepts about how you use science to predict and prevent, and how you use your own education to basically personalize and participate with your doctor and your healthcare professionals. They just can't know enough about you
Yeah.
without you wanting to care about it.
Yeah.
And the second you wait till you break, it is the highest investment once you're sick and the lowest return. And
Mm-hmm.
once you break a system, so if you have to take a drug because you're now diabetic or you have to have a surgery your system is going to be different forever. So let's try to avoid sickness. Let's not
Yeah.
just wait till it happens and then we readjust.
Yeah. Prevention's better than the cure. Thank you for sharing that. So every year we do a Human CEO book list or reading list at Christmas. So that's the reason that we ask every guest for 1 or 2 recommendations. So I'll share that with you when it comes out at the
Well,
end of the
those are
year.
my 3.
Oh, the signal went then. So we'll.
That's. I think we're the gods are telling us that I've been talking
Yeah.
too much. So
No, we'll chop that out. But thank you so much for joining us, Blair. I really appreciate you making the time. It's been a really good conversation. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.